If I could now hand the floor over to Hellen Swales. Hellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to once again acknowledge the participation or the invitation that we have to be here to give a perspective from NGOs in New Zealand. So thank you very, very much. As the theme is the future of work and the promotion of flexibility, a lot of people think that when they talk about flexibility, women are not asking, I want to leave work early to go and pick up the children, because that's what a lot of people think, that that's what it's about, flexibility. So what we look at when we're looking at flexibility, and there has been a legislation that has come in, we're looking at the flexibility of working with hours, but also the opportunity to work from home. We're looking at part-time work and re-looking at what part-time work would look like. We're also looking at the condensed hours. So when we're talking about condensed hours, doing still the 40 hours a week, but not doing it 5 days a week. We also are looking at job share, how we can do a job share. And all of these spaces that women want to play in, especially when they're looking at returning to the workforce, are all really important avenues. Now, we have legislation in New Zealand that allows for employees to ask for all of these things, very similar to what we have in Australia. Our biggest problem is that only 35% of the employees in New Zealand have that remote opportunity to do that, or are aware that they have the ability to do that. So what we've been doing is making sure that we're working with organisations to put toolkits together for people to know what they're actually entitled to do. So when we look at the participation in the workforce, and we're looking at the OECD countries, New Zealand is 5th on the labour force, so we know that we're participating. But then when we break that down and drill it down into women and them participating, we look at the normal hours of employment, we look at the hours which are on the weekend, and we find that the proportion of women that are working in weekend work is about 75% of our workforce. You then look at the unnormal hours, where you're looking at from 11 o'clock at night going through to the morning shift. Once again, women feature very, very highly in those numbers and statistics. And it's because that's the only place where they can walk back into the workforce. We find that if we also drill down into the numbers and the stats and try and segregate out that information, we're finding that those that are more highly educated, as the Minister from Fiji has said, they are better informed and they can actually go and negotiate on their own part. But then when you're a solo parent or a solo person or a one-income family, mainly a woman, it's really hard. You don't have the choices that are there. You go and you look at the trades and the industries that you're working in, and you don't have the opportunity to have any of these 5 disciplines that I've talked about, because they're just not there. They're not the options there in caregiving work, or in the hospitality industry, or those spaces where a lot of women are actually returning back into the workplace. So what we do is we work on a number of different levels, and one of those levels that we work on is what we call the Women's Empowerment Principles in New Zealand, which an anagram is WEPS. So what we do is we work with them and we work with workshops, and most of the banks in New Zealand are the most progressive that we've got in our country, that actually offer those job sharing opportunities for women, and they go right from the boardroom right down to the teller who dispenses your money. And it's being that flexible with the job opportunities that they have. Not only that, they educate all of the people that work for them as to what their rights are and what they're entitled to. And it's about making sure that that gets out there in the workspace. The other thing that we are looking at, or do in our country, is that a private members bill came in around extending the parental leave. Not only that, once again, we have moved that from the original 13 weeks to extending it to 18 weeks paid parental leave, but we actually allow both men and women to take that paid parental leave. So if you are obviously the person that delivers the child, you might then want to go back to work after 4 weeks, then your partner can take the remaining part. Once again, that's sharing that role and changing that gender perception of who should be the role model and what they're doing. So the other thing that we're looking at is there was a move by government to try and change the childcare. At the moment in New Zealand, For a child that is between the ages of 3 and 5, we offer 20 hours paid childcare. The government was trying to change that model and look at changing the age that we actually offered that childcare. Obviously, NGOs got behind that and said, no, that wasn't something that we wanted. But then looking at the wider scope of the gender pay gap, we were thinking to the government, well, why don't you look at maybe paying that to the individual families? Because that's part of what we're doing, is we're pushing our families to go out to work. When in actual fact, if you looked at paying that 20 hours to keep that mother at home who is bringing up and developing our next generation, that would be an option. And we're saying investigate these things, because unpaid care or unpaid work is huge for women. And where it comes to bite us is at the end of our retirement. So, you know, there are lots of things, and what sometimes we do is we're like racehorses with blinkers on. You know, we get a little bit skittery, so you put the blinkers on. When in actual fact, there are lots of issues that feather into each other, and we need to keep looking globally and the bigger picture. So, like I said, when we work with the companies that belong to WEBs, we actually ask them to do a survey at the end of the year, where we get them to participate in what we call the White Camellia Awards. And that we associate because we were the first country to get the women's vote, and the flower for Kate Shepherd was a White Camellia. So we have all these synergies and stories behind stories behind stories. But what we ask those people to do is to actually put down and report, so that we get the information of where they actually are with regard to the landscape of women, going right from grassroots to the boardroom, and how they are actually encouraging them to return back into the workforce after they have had their parental leave, that they keep them still engaged, that they still invite them periodically to come back to be part of that management conversation. So for us, it's really important, that engagement, and it continues. So what we're trying to do in New Zealand is to get everyone through the government, and thank goodness MB, the Ministry of Innovation and Employment, to actually work with us to put on the website, their website, a toolkit which talks about all the different options that you're entitled to. And then not only do we tell you what you're entitled to, but we also give you the case study of how to ask. And then, as the Minister said, give them the rationale that it's good for their business, right? So all of that information is there, because sometimes when we're doing toolkits, it's all about telling you this is what you're entitled to. But we know as women, we are not very good at putting our case forward. We are not very good at asking. Unless we know we can do it, we shy. So we need to have. So that's where we've taken it just that step forward, by giving them the case, putting the question there that might be posed by the employer, right, and giving them the answer of how to negate that. So I could go on, but I know that there are two other people, but for us in New Zealand, we are definitely working towards changing that landscape and educating both, not only our own people, but our Indigenous people and our Pacific people, because when you once again drill down on those figures, it is our Indigenous people and our Pacific Island family that work and live in New Zealand that are the worst when it comes to gender pay gaps. Because whilst we can say, hand on heart, we have a 13% gender pay gap, the reality is between our Indigenous Māori people, it sits at 25%. A Pacific family that are in our country with us, it's 38%. So we can do averages and we make figures look and say anything that they want to, but the reality is that we've got a lot of work still to do. So
Well done.
thank you.
Thank you, Helen, so much for those comments, but in particular in relation to the toolkit that you put together for women, because I absolutely agree with you. I meet so many women who just don't have the confidence to ask. And yet, if you give them the tools, then it makes it so much easier. And the good news is, often the answer is yes.
Yes,
It's yes. They just didn't know how to ask. But also in relation to, the varying types of flexible work that is now available.